to share with you, because as I was thinking about where I'm at now in church service and what I'm doing, and if you told me 2 years ago this is what I'd be doing, I'd go, yeah, right, you better adjust your medication. It's been a journey that it's funny, and in this church it kind of started with, I volunteered to be assistant treasurer only because the slide kept coming out every week. I go, I can do that. But as far as actually, ministering to people in this manner, speaking and ministering, that came from Wednesdays with Friends, when Alan did it last summer, and there was an opening on the calendar, and I was already helping him with other things, and I go, I had my testimony about the little, what do you call it, injection of joy I got on Pentecost Sunday, and I go, I need to talk about it, and I'm going to speak on joy. So I started that, and it just became something, and here I am. But I've been a believer for like 40 years, and I have been in service and ministry about the same time, and I wanted to tell you about my first foray, sticking my toe in the water of being in Christian leadership. And it's a fun story, and it definitely will speak to the fact that, God uses imperfect people, because I'm about as imperfect as they come. I was then, I am now. There's been no real change, other than His mercy and grace. And I think I've grown a little, but we're still imperfect. But I had become a believer back when I was in the Baptist church with my first husband. When we were dating, and I went to the church his parents went to, and that's when I actually truly became, dedicated to the Lord. I got baptized in the old Baptist baptismal, It was really cool. Got a really good foundation. And it was after he and I got divorced, so we were married 2 whole years. It was just, well, I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, we were married 2 whole years. And it's when I was still in the church, though, by that time I was going to Calvary Chapel with some people that I was working with. They had invited me to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and really got a good education out of that, met some wonderful people. But it was when one of the people that was in my neighborhood, I was living in a mobile home park back then, he was a guy that he had known my husband and I, and he came over one time. He's like, well, hey, you want to come feed the homeless people on Saturday night? I'm like, I don't know about serving like that. I was still very shy about my testimony. I didn't know how to tell people about the Lord. I still felt kind of new at this whole thing. And he's like, you can serve food, can't you? I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I can. It just really convicted me. Like, okay, yeah, if I can just stand there and serve food, fine. So it was a group called Builders of Faith, and they went every Saturday night out in downtown Santa Ana, out there in the, Civic Center, out in front of the courthouse or whatever it is over there. And I ended up going every Saturday night. I enjoyed it so much, met more people that I really liked, and I had just being a faithful person showing up, and I got to know the leaders of the group who started it. There were 2 married couples, one of them being Mike and Claire. I can't remember the other couple. They actually ended up dropping out. They left the ministry, not for bad reasons. I think they just had to move on. But they were all board members, and so there was a couple empty seats on the board, and so they asked me to be a board member. I was like, sure, why not, And by that time, I was actually getting a feel for, this feeding the homeless thing is nice. But I had on my heart, I would like to deliver food to people in their homes, maybe preventing homelessness, So that was kind of the thing on my heart. And as a board member, I was working on that or whatever. And then one Saturday night, and I was still just showing up on Saturday nights for the most part. That was Mike and Claire's gig, And so one Saturday night, Mike and Claire were going to be gone. They asked me if I'd fill in for them. I said, sure, I could do that. I had actually lived with Mike and Claire for about a month ironically, I was technically homeless for about a month because I was in between apartments. You know, I was moving out of one and about to go into another place, and the people said I had to be out, but then this place wasn't ready, and I was like, so my people, come live with us. And, you know, they live in Huntington Beach, really nice home. They put their daughter in another room, and I had her room for a month. And so, you know, they were just really wonderful people. And so I got to see all the ins and outs of, I totally knew how to do Saturday night, you know, just by observation. And so they went on their weekend, and so Saturday night I showed up at their house, and they had everything worked like clockwork. They had volunteers that dropped off the big pots of soup in their driveway. I just had to put them into the van, which was a VW van. But it wasn't the cute kind like you got. It was brown with white trim. It was a Westphalia, real ugly thing with, you know, square kind with a pop-up top, you know, whatever. And yeah, so I drove that thing, and it was an automatic too. You know, you couldn't even like force the gears to go faster.
How can you get a Volkswagen that's got such little power? How could it run an automatic transmission? That's crazy.
It was an automatic transmission.
Wow.
Well, you know, it was like, you know, 0 to 35 in 7 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We're on the driveway. Yeah, it was an adventure, because at the time I drove a little 2-seater Pontiac Fiero, so you can imagine the culture shock. But anyway, so yeah, I drove the van out to Santa Ana from Huntington Beach, you know, and we got all set up and we did our thing, and what we did was we'd set up the long tables, and so we just had an assembly line. And basically it was real simple. All you had to do was the first volunteer took a plate, handed it to the next volunteer, took a plate, and I was kind of at the end of the line, just kind of overseeing everything, whatever. And I noticed there was kind of like this thing happening in the food line where there was confusion. You know, homeless people were standing there with plates that they kept giving back. And so I noticed one of my volunteers, I had never known this person before. I guess he was new or whatever. And so, and I didn't know everybody by name anyway, but I've never seen this guy before. But what he was doing was he was taking the plate and giving it to the homeless person rather than just, you know, giving it back, which is a minor detail, but I'm kind of getting the side eye from the other volunteers going, yeah, fix this, you know. I'm like, okay. So I went up to the guy and I'm like, hey, excuse me, I noticed you're giving the plate to the volunteers, or excuse me, to the homeless people. Could you please just pass it to the next volunteer? And I couldn't believe what happened. He's like, well, sister, da, 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 da. And he just had some kind of pushback on me, like, you know, don't tell me what to do kind of thing. But what got to me too was the sister. You know, well, sister, and I was just like, I mean, I was like, I don't know, 24, 25 at the time, and I know we're all brothers and sisters in the Lord, but it just sounded so hokey to me. I mean, I just didn't receive that very well. I was like, whatever, dude, you know. And he was kind of young too, so it seemed out of place for him to call me sister. I just thought that was just an old-fashioned kind of thing, you know. But anyway, so he gave me some pushback where I said, look, I just need you to do what the other volunteers do. You know, we all have a thing we're doing here. Just, you know, please. And he's, oh, okay. So that was that. But then, I don't know, a few minutes later, same little tussle in line. It was the same guy. So I went up to him again, and I said, hey, I'm sorry to be a nag, or whatever I said. I can't remember exactly, but it was more like, I hate to be a nag, hate to get on your case, but I really need you, you know, to do this the way we do things here. And again, well, sister, more pushback. And I'm just like, I can't believe this guy, you know. Instead of just saying, oh, hey, I'm sorry, let me do it the way you all do, because I'm new here and I'm doing your thing. No, he just didn't have that kind of attitude. So I was like, look, I said, I can tell that maybe you just want to, you know, give the food to the homeless person. I can put you at the other end of the line where they're the person who, oh, no, that's okay, but then I need you to do it this way, okay? And okay. So we were finally done feeding the homeless person. We got through that. And then the next thing we always did is then we went out and mingled with the homeless people. We ministered to them, talked to them or whatever. And I had my regulars I talked to and knew them by name. They're the same people we saw every Saturday. And I noticed at one point, as I was kind of off to one, like I was closer to the building, our tables were over closer to the parking lot, and I was closer to the building, and between the buildings there's this grass area. And I saw this little boy, and it looks like he was about 4 or 5 years old, and I didn't see any adult with him. And I was really concerned, and of course my heart was for homeless women and children. I just really have a heart for them. That's why I really wanted to avoid homelessness for these people. And so I went up to him and I said, "Hey, buddy, are you here with a grown-up? Your mom or your dad?" "Oh, I'm here with my dad." "Oh, great. Where is he?" "Oh, he's over there." And I kind of pointed wherever. "Okay, you know what? Let's go find your dad, because you shouldn't be here alone." So we get over into the area again where it's closer to where everybody else is, and I go, "Okay, where's your dad?" He points, and I'm like, "Yes, yeah." So I thought, "You gotta be kidding me." Of course. I was really kind of incensed, because I was like, it's one thing that homeless people would bring their kids, right? Because of what you do. But this was a volunteer who brought his kid.
Unsupervised.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
It could have disappeared.
So I was a little ticked off, but I was like, okay. So I went up to him, and he was talking to somebody, and I didn't want to interrupt, And so when there was a break in the conversation, I was like, "Hey, excuse me, this is your son?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah. I said, "Well, I found him around the corner there. There was nobody around him watching him." I said, and I gave him the whole thing about, he really needs to be supervised, and, and then I was even talking to him like, it's probably not even a good idea you bring him here. This isn't a place for children. "Well, sister, you train up a child the way he should go," and, okay, I know that verse. "You train up a child the way he should go, and when he's older, he won't depart from it." I knew what he was going to try and tell me. I knew he was going to tell me, "Oh, well, I'm just, being a good Christian man and bringing my son here to train him up and in service of the Lord and everything." But I wasn't having it. I interrupted him, and when he said, "Well, sister, you train up a child the way you should go," I said, "Would you stop calling me sister? I have a name." And he just froze, and it was just, at that point, I knew that whatever cosmic test of the universe I was going through, as far as being fit for Christian leadership, that I had failed spectacularly. But I also knew that this guy was on my last nerve. And I think he said something to me like, "Well, hey, I don't know your name." I said, "Fair point." But I just was talking to him like, I told him who I was, and, I'm a leader here, I'm filling in for somebody else, and I'm responsible for everybody's safety, and, if you're bringing a child here, you've got to be watching him, I can't be responsible for what's happening to your child, and that's on you, and, I've got a thing I've got to do here. So we kind of, I forget how we left it exactly. It wasn't horrible. We weren't fighting about it, but it was just a really great experience. It obviously brought out the worst in me and made me realize maybe I'm not fit for Christian leadership. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to, And so, and I realized too, I'm going to have to tell Mike and Claire about this. I'll probably lose my, position on the board, or maybe they won't kick me off the board, but I certainly won't be in charge of anything anymore. But
just for asking him to not call you sister?
Oh, it was the way I said it.
Okay.
Yeah, would you stop calling me sister? I have a name.
Okay.
Well, after the whole night was over and went home, and then I think Claire called me that Monday or Tuesday. That, "Hey, how exciting you go?" And I told her the story. And you know what? Mercifully, she wasn't too sussed about it either. And so there was a lot of mercy and grace shown to me at that time. I was like, okay, thank you, Lord. But then she was curious who this guy was, causing this kind of trouble, And so I don't remember what his name was. And Claire was the one you would always talk to. We didn't publish our address, where we went. we would just say, Builders of Faith, feeding downtown Santa Ana, Saturday nights, and call, And so Claire would at least call, give everybody the address if she felt like the person was fit to, if they were serious about being out there. And most people she knew by face because she went to a big church. She went to the Eagle's Nest in Santa Ana. And so she knew a lot of people that they, knew about the ministry. So she most likely knew them by face and everything. So she asked me to describe
Are
it.
you talking about the volunteers?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I started describing him, and well, he was like, and she goes, oh, that must be Phil.
Your
Spoiler
husband?
alert. I had a feeling.
Oh,
I had a feeling. Yeah, that was my Phil. Your Phil, our Phil.
Phil's sister.
I had no idea. No.
Yeah,
Oh, my
that was our meet cute.
That put him in your count there at the line.
Yes,
for
I
some
mean,
reason.
this is where I say not only is God merciful as far as using, broken people, leaky people, but he's got a good sense of humor. Very good sense of humor. And so, Claire knew Phil, and she said, yeah, that must be Phil. I was like, well, I know who he is, but he's a pain that, But she was telling me his story, and at that time, his wife had left him. She was with another man. He was really upset about not being able to see his child all the time. That's why he drags him to ministry,
Oh.
And I'm like, well,
So
he
that
loves
was
his child.
Aaron.
Well, I'm like, if he loves his child so much, why is he leaving him? Whatever, But and I started to really feel like the horse's rear end for being so hard on him, So I was already softening over this guy, Phil, and then she tells me, she says, maybe he could help you with your ministry, of delivering food, because he's always looking for ways to serve. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel that bad. But I said, well, I was really doing the cringe thing of like, oh, I don't want to have him. If he's going to be so much trouble, do I really want this person helping me in a ministry? Okay, I'll call him, Claire. So I did. And the way I put it to Phil was, hey, yeah, I heard, that you like serving, and Claire thought you might be good for this thing that I'm doing, and I've got a lot of volunteers, but I really need someone to help me lead this thing. And he told me, he goes, I don't know if I'd be a good leader. I said, well, you know what? I just kind of more or less need I need someone to help me drive around and pick up the donations. Oh, he was all over that because he had this little Colt wagon, and he loved driving around, picking things up and delivering them to people, So.
Did he know who you were at this point?
Oh yeah, I told him. I said, hey, I'm sorry. I'm the frazzled nut that you met that night. But it was funny because we got together, and our first time we spent time together was to go do this route where we went and picked up all the food and everything, and he was just the most adorable, fun, energetic, funny person, and at the time he was still married, so I never thought about anything like that because I was dating someone else. And then we just kept spending time together because he was my right-hand guy now. And sometimes we even, we got the ministry going to where every Saturday morning now we still met at Mike and Claire's house in the driveway, put together the bags of food, and then we had names of people that churches referred to us, and we sent people off in pairs, and a lot of times he and I were a pair because all the volunteers were paired up. They have someone they already want to go with, whatever. So we spent a lot of time together. And as we did, I had an inkling that there was something between us that, how that goes, So yeah, so it was, and I remember I fell in love with his smile, But like I said, God has a sense of humor and uses very imperfect people in funny situations. And from there, I got involved in a lot more ministry because Phil was already at that point. It wasn't, I don't know why he was looking for something else because he was already doing all sorts of stuff. He was, they had a prayer ministry at, I think it was like a prayer and helps ministry. the way they did like prayer requests is they would have a box of prayer requests, and if you wanted to pray for someone, you went and picked up the card. And so you picked up the card, and like he found a woman, her name was Linda, that she was a single mother of these 2 children, that her car kept breaking down. And so she, oh, pray for me, I need car repair. Well, Phil contacted her and went and worked on her car all the time. And so they you know, had a connection where, you know, he just would help her all the time. And she had ended up being one of our food recipients too. He put her on the list to receive food. So I got to meet her. She was a really wonderful woman. And in fact, when she finally got it all together and she decided to move back to Ohio with her girls, she gave Phil her car. And then we were able to give it to somebody else, you know. But at the time, he was also, well, you know, he was doing his whole, you know, sponsoring kids through Compassion. He was already with Federico in the Philippines, and then another guy, Marnie, who I just heard from Marnie this week. After all these years, Marnie just found out about Phil's passing on Facebook. So that was kind of bittersweet, because he also has a testimony about he attributes his entire ministry to Phil's help.
Wow.
Yeah. But so he was doing that, and I mentioned Compassion International. He was sponsoring a couple kids, and then he was also working at this crisis hotline out of Santa Ana, where, you know, you go in and sit and do the phones, and it's people calling, they either need counseling or they're feeling like they want to kill themselves, and that was really interesting. I was interested in, you know, counseling and psychology and all that sort of stuff, and it was really fascinating. But bless you.
Bless you. Thank you.
It was funny because as we were spending more time together, he would, you know, he'd call me from, you know, the hotline between calls, and so, and every once in a while he'd have to put me on hold because he got a call, and sometimes I'd have to wait a couple minutes, and then sometimes if it was too long, I'd hang up, and he'd call me back when he was done. And then there was one time he didn't call for half an hour. I thought, wow. I go, that must have been some call. He goes, oh no, I fell asleep. You fell asleep after the call? No, during the call.
Oh dear.
Which, you know, that tracks. That was true. In fact, it wasn't too long ago, you know, Phil and I did a lot of reminiscing, you know, when he was sick. And I asked him, I said, do you remember the night we met? Oh yeah, we met on the line, which is what we call, you know, the homeless thing. I go, well, do you remember when we first met? Our first conversations? I said, so I reminded him, I told him the story that I just told you. And he goes, oh, sounds like nothing's really changed. I said, yeah, I didn't look back to you know my name. Yeah, nothing's really changed. But, yeah, so, you know, and since then, when I ended up being a counselor on the hotline too, and it was very rewarding. It was a little weird, but it was rewarding. I remember we had to roll on a suicide attempt, and it was really gratifying to be able to,
You had what?
we had to roll. It's what we call, as the person's talking to you, and they've indicated, you know, the one that I talked to said she'd taken some pills. I said, okay, so what was your name? Okay, and so have you talked to your doctor about this? And who's your doctor? What you do is you try and get information. I was able to find out her doctor, where she lived, where the doctor was, and then you call 911. And you give them as much information as they call the doctor. He can look through his patient list and go, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. And sure enough, they intervened. They were able to send. You know, so like I said, it was very rewarding on that level. On the other hand, sometimes you talk to people that are just weirdos that try to get you into conversations while they're, you know, they have fetishes, and if you're saying the right words, they're getting aroused. And yeah, it was you. Yeah.
It was you.
And yeah, and we weren't allowed to confront them, but I couldn't stand it one day. Again, and when people tick me off, I let them know it. But it was a guy that was into spanking, and he says, I want to talk to you about, you know, is it okay to spank a child? And what he used to do was try to get people to describe it, you know, and the girls would just, you know, cooperate. I'm like, no. So when he called me and started to talk about it, I go, you just want to talk about spanking tonight, don't you? And he's like, no. I'm like, no, I'm not going to let him abuse me that way. It's, it's not right. But yes, it was weird, but then other times it was super rewarding, But yeah, from there, that's when Phil and I were actually dating, and I broke up with a guy that I was dating. And so we were a couple now and getting serious and everything, and that's when we found, at the time it was called New Hope Fellowship, it's now Hope Chapel, over on Lake Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where we got married.
Oh, wow.
That's where we dedicated at least not Andrew, but Ben and Sarah. And then we never got a chance to dedicate Andrew. They had a whole change of leadership over there. That's when Paul and Ainsley came over, and it was just too much was going on. So I'm glad Andrew got baptized because we never got to dedicate you properly. But when we went over to that church, because he was going to the Eagles Nest, I was going to Calvary, so we wanted something that was in the middle. But once we got to that church, that's when we just got so involved in ministry. I was doing children's ministry. We were both on the praise and worship team. Phil was doing all kinds of things, whether it was collecting all those tapes that Firefighters for Christ used to do a thing of the tape ministry. And so Phil started a tape library in the church, and he was just constantly, like he always is, he was already working with his nesting place. We were like a clearinghouse for his nesting place. Our garage was a clearinghouse, because people knew we were giving to them and said, oh, can we drop off our stuff? And I'm sure. Yeah. But, that's where our whole thing of service began, was just really me trying to keep up with Phil. Well, like I said, imperfect people, and I'm about the most imperfect human yet. So I praise God for that. But as far as, I didn't have any questions for you tonight, other than if you want to talk about, what kind of ministry you'd like to be in, where you feel your gifts are, and if there's anything holding you back, I say, don't let it, because look at me. I'm as I say imperfect as they come. And
well, I have a comment though about the homeless food line. I wonder how it compared back then to what it is today.
as far as the volume, the numbers, I don't think anything. Yeah, I would say if the numbers may have increased, but the problems are exactly the same. We have a lot of mental illness. We had resources to give people. We had a whole sheet of stuff, places they could go, and not just to go to stay, but like where to get things. And it's amazing how many of them don't want help. And when we were bringing our friend Bruce here, he was homeless, and we were bringing him here on Sundays. He liked the freedom, and that's the thing too. It's a lot of them don't do well in a structured society. So, but as far as the numbers, you're right. Yes, there's a much greater need, and I'm sure a lot more people would, want to help if you could give them a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my story. I was hoping to tell that at Palooza. I was definitely going to tell the story at Palooza.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's how Phil and I met. That was our meet cute.